On this edition of Early Look, I'm going to be previewing the welterweight main event September 7th as part of UFC Fight Night at the Apex. My name is James Lynch. If you never watched the show before, I'm going to go through a bunch of different stats, a bunch of different intangibles, and then I'm going to give you my prediction at the end of this video. Some of this stuff may have relevance, it may not. You can decide that in the comments. Would love to hear your prediction on this fight, which is coming up here pretty soon. Big fight in the welterweight division. As we always do, let's do a quick tail of the tape in this one. You can see there, Gilbert Burns, 22-7, Sean Brady, 16-1. 38 years old for Gilbert Burns, 31 for Sean Brady. They're both 5'10". Gilbert Burns with a 71-inch reach, 72.5 for Sean Brady. So yeah, really exciting fight. We're going to start first with Gilbert Burns, the former UFC title challenger. And obviously got to mention as well, as most of you know, this is a 5-round fight. So I mentioned it there. Gilbert Burns, 22-7. He's got 6 knockouts, 9 submissions, and 7 decisions. He's currently ranked number 6 in the welterweight division. He's 38 years old. He's 5'10" with a 71-inch reach. He's a 3-time world champion and World Cup gold medalist in grappling. He's got a 3rd-degree BJJ black belt and trains at a Kill Cliff MMA. He's got performance of the night 4 times against Christos Giagos, Alex Oliveira, Damian Maia, and Tyron Woodley. He's got fight of the night 1 time against Khamzat Chimaev. Made his amateur debut way back in July of 2011. Made his MMA debut in January 2012, made his UFC debut in July of 2014. He is 12-7 in the UFC. Some notable wins include, we're not going to go through this whole resume here, but some notable wins here for Burns include Gunnar Nelson, Damian Maia, Tyron Woodley, Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, Neil Magny, and Jorge Masvidal. That was the last win he had, was Masvidal. He's also had a lot of losses as well, and he's fought in multiple weight classes. We'll talk about that in a sec, but some notable losses include Rashid Magomedov, Michel Pereira, Dan Hooker, got knocked out by him, if you remember a couple of years ago. Kamaru Usman, Khamzat Chimaev, Bilal Muhammad, and Jack Della Maddalena. He's had a few layoffs in his career due to injury, but he's also been in the UFC for a while, so very much understandable that way. Going from Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, a fight that he won, to Khamzat Chimaev, there was a 273-day layoff. Going from Chimaev to Neil Magny, there was a 287-day layoff. And then going from Bilal Muhammad to Jack Della Maddalena, there was a 308-day layoff. This will be his 2nd fight this year, so he's actually had back-to-back fights. Well, he had 3 fights actually in 2023. And then he has back-to-back fights this year. So Burns fairly active in the division. He's had a number of injuries and other stuff, weight misses and stuff for lightweight, but we're not going to go through all those here today because, again, he's been in the UFC for quite some time. Let's skip right ahead to the weight classes. Gilbert Burns has fought 14 times at lightweight. He's had 2 catchweight fights, both one at 160 and one at 158, where his opponent missed weight. This will be his 11th fight at welterweight in the division, so still has fought more at lightweight overall in his career. Wanted to mention quickly, he's got back-to-back losses coming into this. Bilal Muhammad, Jack Della Maddalena. You look at that Jack Della Maddalena fight, if you look at it on paper, you think, okay, bad performance, got finished in the 3rd round, but I actually went back and watched this fight. I thought Gilbert Burns was up in this fight 2 rounds to nothing. The rounds were close, but I definitely thought that Burns was ahead, and I think had he held on and not got finished in that 3rd round, he probably would have won this fight. So the context is important because people would look at this fight and say, hey, Burns is on back-to-back losses, but losing to Jack Della Maddalena, not a terrible loss in the division. Jack is right up there as far as a contender. And then also losing to Bilal Muhammad, who won the title, not a bad loss either. Let's look at some stats for Gilbert Burns like we usually do. Gilbert Burns, you can see significant strikes landed per minute, 3.29, so that's fairly active. Striking accuracy is at 48%. His striking defense is at 54%, so it doesn't get hit that much. His takedown average is 2.24. His takedown accuracy is only at 38%, but his takedown defense is at 50%, and his sub-average is 0.5. Obviously, become more of a striker than a grappler these days, but Gilbert Burns, I mentioned the credentials off the top, has a very good ground game. Let's talk, though, about his opponent, Sean Brady, who comes into this fight as the betting favorite. We'll talk about the odds a little bit later. Let's talk about Sean Brady right now, if it'll click here. 16-1 record, I mentioned it there. 31 years old, going to be... He is 5'10" with a 72.5-inch reach, so he's 7 years younger than Gilbert Burns, and he'll have a 1.5-inch reach advantage. He's the former CFFC welterweight champion. That's notable because CFFC, obviously a really good regional promotion. Trains out of Renzo Gracie, Philly, as a BJJ black belt under Daniel Gracie. Brady's actually got a pretty good ground game, and we saw that in his last fight against Kelvin Gastelum. We'll mention that in a sec. He's got performance of the night 2 times against Christian Aguilera, not to be confused with Christina, and Kelvin Gastelum. Brady made his amateur debut way back in August of 2012, so a little bit later than Gilbert Burns. Obviously makes sense because Burns is older. Won in 9 seconds knockout, which is pretty incredible. And then won his pro debut in 2014 in 33 seconds. So Brady had a lot of hype early on. Did not make his UFC debut until October of 2019. He is 6-1 in the UFC with 3 stoppage victories. Some notable wins include Michael Chiesa, who's been ranked before, and then Kelvin Gastelum in his last fight. Doesn't have a lot of notable wins because some of the other ones are like Jake Matthews, Christian Aguilera, Ismail Nardov, Court McGee, not exactly household names in the UFC. Actually, like I said, has only had 7 fights in the octagon. And his only loss against Bilal Muhammad, which if you remember back then, a lot of people gave Brady a lot of flack for losing that fight. Thought he wasn't that good. Well, Bilal Muhammad is now your welterweight champion. So as far as losses go, not a bad one to have on the resume as Bilal Muhammad, now the current welterweight champion. Brady's had some bad luck over the last little bit with injuries and other stuff going on. He's had 2 major layoffs. So going from Bilal Muhammad to Kelvin Gastelum, there was a 406-day layoff. And then going from Gastelum to Burns in this fight, there'll be a 280 layoff. So he fought at the end of last year. Not terrible, but again, that is something worth noting. Burns been a little bit more active than him before. Let's go through some of the injuries that Brady has had recently. So if you remember, he was supposed to fight Kevin Lee, and Lee pulled out of one of them with a rib injury, and then the fight that was rescheduled, Brady had an injury. And then if you remember, he was supposed to fight Michel Pereira, which is crazy now because Pereira's obviously doing well at middleweight, but he had a groin injury in that one. And then you remember the big fight against Jack Della Maddalena on International Fight Week in 2023. He had a staph infection that pulled him out. Of course, we know JDM ended up fighting, he was supposed to fight Josiah Harrell, I think, and then ended up fighting Basil Hafez shortly after that. So yeah, didn't end up getting that fight. And he was supposed to fight Luque earlier this year, but was still dealing with some injuries, so they had to scrap that fight. Luque was then rebooked against Joaquin Buckley, if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, a few injuries there. Brady has not had any close fights despite having a few decision victories on his resume, but I don't think there were any like controversial decisions or anything like that. What else? And then let's go to his stats. If you look at his stats here, Sean Brady, pretty impressive. Striking accuracy is a little bit higher than, actually, is it higher? Let me check. Yeah, so Gilbert Burns' only significant strikes landed per minute, 3.29. Sean Brady's is slightly higher at 3.77. His striking accuracy is at 53%. His striking defense is higher than Burns at 61%, although, again, Brady had less fights. His takedown average is 3.29. His takedown accuracy is at 57%, which is a lot higher than Burns. And check this out, takedown defense is at 87%. That's pretty good. Now, granted, he hasn't fought a lot of like elite wrestlers, but that's still an impressive stat at 87%. So yeah, let's go look at the betting odds right now. You can see here a couple books having Brady as a slight favorite here, about -155. The comeback on Burns +130. So Brady is the favorite, but Tapology telling us a different story. And again, this is, you don't have to place any money to pick this. But you can certainly look at the odds here, or certainly look at how people are voting. People are actually voting Burns here, 52% compared to Brady 48%. So the opposite of what you're seeing here on the betting odds. People are going with Burns here as opposed to Sean Brady. Okay, how do I see this fight? Well, I see this fight. I mean, when it was first announced, I gave my prediction, and I'm sticking with that prediction here, even after digging into the data. I like Sean Brady here in this fight. A couple of reasons, and I like Sean Brady to win by decision. Now, here's why. Sean Brady, 50% of his wins, if you look at it here, are by decision. That's the majority of how he wins his fights. He doesn't win a lot by knockout, wins more by submission, 31%, but doubtful that happens here with Gilbert Burns and his, grappling accolades. In fact, Gilbert Burns never been submitted in his MMA career. So I don't think Brady's going to be the guy to do it, even though Brady coming off a nice submission win in his last fight over Kelvin Gastelum. And again, that was a late finish. That was 3rd round. Doubtful it happens here against Gilbert Burns unless maybe Brady strikes with him a bit and maybe takes him down and then gets the submission there. The other thing with Brady is, while he hasn't been as active, he's a lot younger. He's 31 years old. He'll have a little bit of a reach advantage in this fight. I think personally, Brady has performed quite well outside of the Bilal fight. And even if you go watch the Bilal fight, like he was hanging in there. Like, him and Bilal were kind of trading blows back and forth, and ultimately he got finished. But, I think outside that performance, Brady has looked quite good in terms of, what he's been able to put together in the octagon. Like I mentioned, Burns has never been submitted in his career. And if you look at Burns' losses, 4 of them are by decision. That's 56%. Burns has been finished twice by knockout. The JDM one was late, like in the third round, like I mentioned, in a fight that I thought Gilbert was winning. And then the other one was against Kamaru Usman in 2021. So I don't think Brady, even though he has knockout wins, I don't think he's going to knock out Gilbert Burns here. I think it's more likely he outworks him to a decision. I think that kind of makes sense as well. And by the way, Burns has only been finished at 170. I know he's been knocked out by Dan Hooker at 155, but again, I'm just looking at the 170 weight class where I think Brady will probably not be able to finish him there. So yeah, again, I expect a close fight. I don't think Gilbert Burns is a pushover by any means. If you look at who Burns has been fighting, it's all top guys for the most part, right? Like Della Maddalena, Bilal, we can scratch out Masvidal. Magny finished him in the first round. I mean, that's what you should be doing against guys lower down in the rankings. Fought Chimaev to a decision. That's a badge of honor. Chimaev finishing a lot of guys, and then beat Stephen Thompson and then lost to Usman. So he's been fighting far better opposition than Sean Brady. I just have to go with Brady here due to the age. Like I said, that sort of has that it factor. I think in that Gastelum fight, he totally outclassed him and looked great. So I'm a believer in Sean Brady. This is one of those ones where I'm kind of betting a bit on potential, but I do think Brady gets it done in this main event at the Apex coming up here on September 7th. So I want to know what you guys think in the comment section below. Who are you picking in this fight? I want your prediction. I would love to hear how you think this fight unfolds. Again, 5-round fight. So I could see Brady, and I should mention again, 5-round fight. So yeah, I do think Brady will take it the full 5 rounds. I don't think Burns has been in 5-round fights. I don't think cardio is like a huge issue where you could see Brady like finishing him late. I think they both have got great cardio. I know there's been some questions about Brady's cardio, but I don't know. I think, since getting some surgery, I think he had some surgery on his nose. I remember speaking to him about that in an interview. Speaking of which, I do have an interview with Brady ahead of this fight. You can find it on my playlist here, UFC playlist. But yeah, I think Brady gets it done. Again, I got to take the younger guy on a 5-round fight over a guy who's getting close to 40 at this point. Actually, well, how old is he? Gilbert Burns is what, 30? He's 38, so that's close to 40 enough. I'm going Brady by decision. Let me know your pick in the comments. Follow me on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, @LynchOnSports. My name is James Lynch. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.